Welcome, guys, to the Baby Playbook podcast. Thank you so much for joining me for another week. I absolutely love having your company on this. And I'm really, really loving all of the positive feedback that I'm getting on the podcast, all of the comments that it's becoming really helpful, that it's all topics that you guys are really interested in when it comes to babies and pregnancy and post-birth. So let's keep it rolling. Let's get all that good information out there. Now, this week's episode is, I was about to say a special episode. I feel like I start every podcast with that. But every episode is a special episode. But this one is particularly special because it is all about milk. So we are tackling the gigantic topic of milk and everything that it involves. So that is from breastfeeding to bottles to formula to heating milk to all the different challenges that you come across when you start that journey of feeding your baby. Because of course, we all know that the first part of their life, all they're relying on is milk. And that is a huge, responsibility that we have as parents to be able to feed them in any sense, whether it's formula or breastfeeding or whatever it may be. So let's get some of my tips and tricks out there and all of the things that I learned during my journey of feeding my baby's milk that I jotted down and I shared with all my friends, and now I am sharing with you. So this is all coming as well from my Mum Advice e-guide, which is available for you to purchase. It tackles all different topics of babies and motherhood within the first 6 months. It is available for you to purchase from Hain.co. So I'll pop the link of that in the bio if you are interested in. It is such a great gift for new mums that are about to become a new mum, something you can email straight through to them and they've got the guide and they can read it and they can kind of sit on it and have a cup of tea and really take it all in. But this chapter is all about milk, and that's what we're going to get into today. Now, I want to preface this by saying that every mum's feeding journey is different. Okay, so no matter what it looks like, it should definitely be celebrated. I remember how daunting this was when I started this particular journey. I wanted to share all different elements of what I came across and kind of start off with my story, now my feeding journey, because it kind of gives you guys a little bit of context on how I got to gather all of these different tips and tricks. So I've got 2 kids. Now let's first talk about my feeding journey with Noah, because he was my first. So this was like the most daunting part of becoming a mum and being able to get hold of feeding him milk. So my journey with Noah consisted of 2 to 3 months of breastfeeding. I gave it a really hot go. Breastfeeding for me, and I'm, really happy to be open and honest about that, it was a challenge for me. It didn't feel, comfortable for me. It was really daunting. It gave me a lot of anxiety thinking about the next feed. It just wasn't something that I clicked with very well. And then as I was kind of trying to power through this period of being uncomfortable, I ended up getting mastitis in one of my breasts. And mastitis is something that you can get whilst breastfeeding. I'll leave that to the medics to explain. And it unfortunately just, really impacted on the journey. So then that's when I made the decision to transition over to formula. Now, whilst I was breastfeeding, I was using bottles, and I will talk about bottles in focus for a large part of this particular episode. But so there was a bit of like combo feeding there with breast and bottle. Now, when it came to Leo, it was quite a similar journey, I would say. I was feeling a little bit more confident going into the second one, but it was about the same. So around about that 2-month mark, when it came to feeding and breastfeeding, things kind of just weren't clicking into place. Another thing that happened was this was during COVID time, so I got COVID, and then, supply dropped a little bit, and then it was all about getting supply back. So I made the decision of going to formula at that point as well. So again, had that bit of a combo and that experience in both areas. So that is my story. Now let's get into all of the different topics that we're tackling today, kicking off with breastfeeding. Okay, so I've said this in a previous episode as well, in my episode of how to prepare for a baby, that one of the things that I wish that I did before I gave birth to Noah, one of the classes that I wish I took was a breastfeeding class. I think that I thought it was going to be easier than it was going to be. I thought it was going to be a lot more natural and just fall into place. And for me, at least, it didn't. I felt like if I had done a class and just gotten some idea of, what could happen, what you're looking out for when it comes to latching, different position, that sort of stuff, it would have been a little bit more helpful to have that information. So I just think that it's, there's nothing wrong with doing a class because it will only help you. If not, you just won't use anything from it. But give yourself the best chance of getting familiar with breastfeeding and what it entails before kicking off that journey. So that is one of my tips. I'm pretty sure a lot of hospitals offer you a breastfeeding class. So ask your midwife or your obstetrician about that, or do an external class, because I know that community areas offer these pretty regularly. Now, when it comes to breastfeeding, if you are going down the pumping route, because this is also an option when it comes to breastfeeding, and I did quite a bit of pumping, I would say invest in a double breast pump just to have the option. Because I think the thing is that if you choose a single breast pump and then you end up feeling like, oh, damn, I should have just done the double, you've kind of wasted your money. So I'm all about saving money when it comes to kids and babies because it can get really expensive. So my first tip there is to buy a double breast pump. I particularly use the Medela Swing Flex electric pump, and it worked a treat, but there's so many out there on the market. My tip there is just to get a double. Now, what you don't realize when you breastfeed is that whilst you're pumping one side or baby is feeding on one side, you can actually get a little bit of milk coming out from the other side at the same time, just because it happens. So a tip here I have is that if you get something like the Haka cup, I hope I'm saying that right, that's a really great tool that you can use to collect milk from the breast that you're not feeding with, because everybody talks about how breast milk is such a valuable thing that you don't want to waste one drop. You'd actually be really surprised at how much comes out of one while the baby is on the other, or the breast is on the other. So don't let it go to waste and use something like that. Also, download a really good breastfeed tracking app to just help track your baby's feeds. What you'll realize with breastfeeding is that it's all about timing and how many hours in between and which breast you use first, and it can get really hard to keep on top of it. So a breastfeeding app, I know Medela has one, is just where you can literally log in, you can pop in and go, okay, I've fed from the left breast for this many minutes. And then you can see when you get to the next feed where you fed last and how long it took. So it's just really nice to keep track of it. You will be using, if you are pumping, a lot of breast milk storage bags. So you can get actually reusable ones of these, which helps with, plastic waste and stuff like that. And you end up using quite a few. So this could be a really good option to save some money as well. Now, if you're in Australia, one of the resources that I relied on during my breastfeeding journey was the Australian Breastfeeding Association site. So they're a site and also a 24/7 helpline, 24/7. So this is a helpline that is government funded, and that where you can actually call anybody at any point in the night or the day. It's quite crazy. I think I did many a 2 a.m. calls to this number, and it's volunteers that can help you get through and answer some questions. So it could be anything from, I feel like I'm losing supply in one breast. I don't really know if the baby's latching, I don't know what position to try. And they really have some really good tips and tricks, and it's free. So I just love kind of letting people know about this because it is so, so useful. Even things like, how do you store your breast milk? How long does it last in the fridge and freezer? All that sort of thing. Now, breastfeeding, I want to say, can take a while. People don't realize it takes a really long time sometimes. You might have a baby that feeds within a couple of minutes, but some babies take a really long time. And especially during that first little bit when baby's also getting used to the fact that they're feeding and figuring out breastfeeding, it can take them a really long time to get a good feed in. So what I would say is set up a really comfortable spot at home for you to feed in and just have everything on hand there. So obviously, we've talked about this. You need a lot of water. You need to keep hydrated. So a big bottle of water to help you get through, because if you don't going to be getting up for a while, you're going to get quite thirsty. Something like a lip balm, some snacks, things like that. Just have them all ready for you. You can get those little caddies next to you, which are really good. And you can also pop in things like bibs and little burping cloths and just everything that you need on hand. And then what I would say is, I shared a little bit before about how coming up to a feed, it can be quite anxious for some people. And it was for me. I felt like all I could think about was, I'm going to have to sit down. I'm going to have to do this. It might be a little bit painful. I don't know if baby's going to latch properly. So it kind of triggered some anxiety behind it. So what I ended up doing was, especially with the night feeds, I picked a really good TV show that I was binging at the time. So I only dedicated it to breastfeeding and when I was feeding, and I could only put it on during those times because then I really looked forward to the fact that I could watch it. So it was kind of like a really nice positive part of feeding for me. And what I remember was, this is a really good recommendation as well, but at the time it was Superstore, which was a very, very funny series on Netflix. It might be, I think it's still on Netflix. So it was just really light and fun, and it was something that I only put on when I breastfed, and it really kind of kept me company during that time. So I want to finish off this particular topic as well in terms of breastfeeding, that breastfeeding is really hard. So just be kind to yourself. And if you ever really need any help, I think you really should seek it. What we don't realize is, once you come home with the baby, it feels, or you can feel like quite alone in terms of not really having the help or the guidance. Your midwife's kind of dropped off because her appointments have finished up. The local community nurse isn't coming around anymore. So seek out help if you need. And this could be from your GP, a lactation consultant, your midwife, again, just shoot them a text or something, or your local health nurse. Don't feel like you just have to figure it out yourself. Seek help, ask questions, get onto that Australian Breastfeeding Association line. Don't be afraid to just ask the questions so that you can make it a little bit easier for yourself. And now we are going to touch on formula slightly. So formula is also a really daunting task in terms of just figuring out which one you're going to use and which one works for your baby and transitioning them to it. It can be really, really overwhelming. There are so many different formulas on the market, and it's really hard to know which one to choose outright. So my advice here is, if you're really quite overwhelmed and daunted by it, check in with your GP on this or your midwife. If, of course, I'm going to preface anything by saying that if you feel like your baby perhaps has reflux, or your baby has a bit more of a sensitive tummy, then it's really important to seek medical advice before you transition into a formula and keep it steady and going for quite some time. My experience was, I think I went through like 4 different brands before landing on the one I regularly fed my babies with. And then I just used that one for Leo as well on the second time, because I just wasn't interested in going through another few options. So I think a good start is to speak to your doctor about your selection. Of course, if your baby has any allergies or intolerances, that you need to speak to them before introducing formula, because that'll also impact the selection. And then what I would say as well is give it a really good hot go. I think what I've found is, as mums, I've done it, and other mums tell me, is when you start a formula, you give 1 bottle, you get a little bit uneasy about it. Maybe your baby's a bit about it, doesn't really want to try it, isn't a fan of the flavor. You've got to understand that this is the first time for them as well, and you need to give them a really good shot at adopting it and their stomach to kind of appropriate itself to it. So don't just, do 1 bottle and then give up on the tin and think, oh, this one's not working, and try another bottle. Because you can imagine for baby, that's really hard as well. You're giving them all these different formulas to get used to. You just have to give it a really good hot go, unless, of course, it's causing a lot of disturbance and you feel like it's really not sitting right. Then, of course, seek that medical attention. All right, let's move on to bottles. Okay, first of all, introducing bottles, whatever you want to say with that. I am going to kick off with saying that I think this is really, really important. Introducing a bottle into your baby's routine allows early, let me say that, early, means that you won't struggle with this transition later on when they're really, really used to, for example, breastfeeding, and are not interested at all in trying something other than breastfeeding. And if you introduce it, it not only allows you as a mum to, be able to say, okay, someone else will do a feed here, give you a break, let you go to the shops, let you see your friends, because you're able to leave baby with a bottle and someone else to feed it for them. It just gives you that slight bit of freedom and autonomy. But it also gets your partner involved as well. For Nick and I, at least, he used to always do the Dream Feed bottle, which was right before he went to bed. Now, I talk about the Dream Feed in my episode with Tizzy Hall from Save Our Sleep, a really good sleep tactic, so make sure you listen to that. But yeah, it allows your partner to also get involved in the feeding journey. So I was told by my local nurse, I read it in multiple baby books, that if you introduce at least 1 bottle a day within the first 6 to 8 weeks, this helps baby get used to it and avoids any bottle refusal later on. So that's 1 bottle a day at the same time each day in the first 6 to 8 weeks. It will save you some serious issues later with introducing a bottle. So as I said, I would express that Dream Feed out each day, so then my husband could feed the baby this feed from the bottle each night. Gave me a really nice break from feeding, and it gave me an early bedtime because, of course, I was getting up during those night wakes to do breastfeeding. So that was really, really helpful. What I'd say with this, pick a time and stick to that particular feed. So don't chop and change when which feed you give as a bottle each day. If it's going to be the Dream Feed bottle, keep it as the same feed. And then when you introduce the second, third, fourth bottle and so on, if you are going to do that, then do the same. So then pick the 7 a.m. feed, and that's always a bottle for the next month. Don't kind of chop and change it during the day. Babies, as we know, love routine. They love to know what's next, and they get really familiar with patterns. So it's really important to have a pattern there when it comes to introducing a bottle. Now, the journey to find a bottle that your baby is happy with might be super short, or it might be a really, really long and confusing one. One thing that'll help here is if you do it early, because of course, if your baby is then used to a bottle and the breast from really early and they can't really tell the difference at that time, then it doesn't really give them the chance to be super fussy about it. So introducing a bottle early will help with this. And my other tip when it comes to choosing a bottle and a teat especially is making sure that you buy a bottle that fits in with how you feed your baby. Let me explain this. So I use the Pigeon Soft Touch wide neck bottles and teats. The reason I use this is because they're suitable, and you'll see on the website, like when you look up all these bottles, the brands will explain it within the website. These particular bottles and teats are suitable for babies who are breast and bottle fed. It helps with avoiding nipple confusion. So that fit in with the way I fed. They also have bottles and teats that are custom to babies that are only bottle fed. So if you are only going to bottle feed, then look at those bottles. So I think we don't really realize, we think just bottle and teat, that standard image of a baby with a bottle, that they're all the same. They're really not, and can get really confusing. But just hone in on what they're actually made for in terms of what type of feeding journey you're on, and that'll really help you in making that decision. Check the bottle manufacturer's website and all that information before you make your purchase. Now, let's talk about making purchases when it comes to bottles. Look, my big tip here is, again, I always talk about saving money with babies because it can get really expensive. Babies can get really, really expensive. My big tip here is to make sure that you don't buy a bottle unless you are about to get onto that bottle journey. Do not, for example, have it on your baby shower wish list. Are you going to use bottles? Do you know that? Are you going to just introduce that first feed bottle at 6 to 8 weeks? Or are you going to only bottle feed? You don't know that until baby comes around. You might know it, actually. Some people have that plan in place, and that's great. But if you don't know, and if you're going to give breastfeeding a really hot go, then don't, go out and buy all these bottles and just be prepared for it. Because again, because you want to decide on your bottle to fit in with your feeding journey, whether that be breastfeed and bottle feeding or just bottle feeding, you might make the mistake of buying bottles that are just for bottle feeding, and then you end up wanting to, breastfeed and bottle feed, and then you have the wrong bottles with you. So I just avoid that purchase until you really get a good understanding of how baby's feeding and what your feeding journey will be like. When starting off your bottle collection, just buy the large size bottles. You'll find that there's smaller size bottles that are, I think, around 150 mil, and then there's big bottles that are around 240 mil. Don't bother with the smaller ones. I felt like I bought all these small ones thinking that baby was small, but then they end up wanting to drink a lot more, and then I had all these small bottles that wouldn't fit the exact size that my babies were drinking. They wanted more, so it was just a waste. Just buy the large bottles ones and put less milk in them. Don't bother with the small ones. If you're mixed bottle and breastfeeding, these are my recommendations. Have 4 bottles on hand at a time, and that is plenty. So when you start exclusively bottle feeding, then I would have 6 on hand, because that's usually the amount of feeds per day if you're doing that every 3 to 4 hour mark. Trust me when I say you don't want to be sterilizing more than twice a day. So a really good routine to get into, let's just say you're exclusively bottle feeding, is you've got the 6, you've got them ready to go. You use them up during the day. As you use a bottle, you pop it in the sterilizer. We'll talk about sterilizers in a moment. And then at the end of the day, that last bottle you've done, you pop the sterilizer on, you go to bed, and that's sterilized and ready for the next day. You've got your 6. It's just that really nice routine to get reset by the end of the day. Now, if you suspect that your baby isn't drinking efficiently from their bottle, or their feeds start to become smaller, maybe they're waking up more, they seem hungrier, try the next teat size up. This was a game changer for me. I think with teat sizes, let's explain teat sizes, okay? So teat sizes, there's not just one teat that takes them through to the age of like 2, 3. I know it's very confusing. There are different teat sizes that you put on bottles, and the teat sizes are determined by how big the hole is at the end of the teat that the milk comes out from. So for very, very tiny babies that need less milk to be rushing out while they're drinking, the teat size is very, very small. That hole is very, very small. But then the teat size gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and that hole gets bigger because they get stronger and they get able to drink better and more, and they want more milk coming out of the teat. So my advice here is don't go by the age appropriate size, because I think what happens is your baby might be exclusively bottle fed, so they're really, really good at sucking milk out of a bottle. So they might rush through those sizes. Maybe they need a larger hole and they're kind of getting quite frustrated with the bottle. And then because it's taking up so much effort for them to suck the milk out because they have a small teat size, they get over it, they get tired, they stop feeding, and then they're hungry a lot earlier. So try the next teat size up if you see those indicators. So if you see they're not drinking as efficiently, or their feet start to become smaller, or they're waking up and getting hungrier more often. So making sure that you give them that upgrade, and you'd be surprised how quickly your baby goes through those teat sizes, especially if they're using a lot of bottles during the day. That's important. Remember the type of feeding journey that you're both on. So think about that context. A bottle sterilizer is super important if you're planning on introducing a bottle. I use like a Pigeon multifunction steam sterilizer. That was really, really great, but there's so many out there. Just get one that does the basic of sterilizing. Don't be too fussy about it. You also will need to wash so many things before you get them in the sterilizer. You can also put things like breast pump accessories in there, and then later on you can put, dummies and little cutlery. So it actually becomes quite helpful within the first year to have a sterilizer. I used also the Pigeon liquid cleanser, which was like a soap wash for washing all of the things before you pop them into the sterilizer. And my tip here is to buy the refills for those when they're on sale at a discount chemist, and make sure you price match as well, because those can get quite expensive. All right, we are moving on to heating up milk, because this is another part of the milk journey. A lot of people make the mistake of making the milk too cold for their baby. So babies like their milk really nice and warm. They drink more when it's like this. They're comfortable. It's really soothing. Think about when you have a really nice warm cup of cocoa or hot chocolate. You want it to be nice and warm and, do the job of comforting you and feeding you. So obviously, always test the temperature of the milk on your hand first before feeding your baby. That's really, really important. If it stings the moment that it hits your skin, it's too hot, okay? But if it is nice and warm and you feel like, it's not stinging, then that's perfect for the baby. I think we get a little bit scared and we make it a little bit colder than it needs to be. And then baby doesn't really like to drink cold milk. I mean, who wants to be drinking a cold hot chocolate? So just keep that in mind. Of course, don't microwave milk to heat it up. Formula or breast is really important that you heat it up in a different method. So there's a couple of methods that you can use here. Might be a bit controversial, but I actually think bottle warmer machines, they just take way too long to heat up. I just felt like they were a little bit of a waste of money. I did have one for a while, and then I just stopped using it because bottle warmer machines just take way too long. There's a really simple method, which I'll explain in a little moment, that's really helpful for not just bottles on the go, but also bottles at home. And with a bottle warmer, you can't take that on the road as well. I know they have those gadgets now where they're like on the go bottle warmers and stuff like that. But there's an old school way to do it, and that's really, really, really efficient and probably takes the same amount of time. And that is to sit the bottle in a bowl of hot but not boiling water. So that means that you boil the kettle, you pop the bottle in the kettle water that's been mixed with a little bit of cold water just to get it hot and not boiling, because when it's boiling water, you're actually kind of killing all the nutrients within the breast milk or the formula milk. So you want it to be hot but not boiling, and you just sit it in there for, could be a couple of minutes, and then it's done. It's nice and warm and it's ready to feed to your baby. It takes the same amount of time as a bottle warmer machine, so then I just feel like it's kind of, it kind of does the job. Preparing a bottle of formula. This is my extra special science experiment that took me a long time to figure out with Noah, but actually nailed it in the end. And it was a really great way of warming milk for him when it comes to formula every single time, especially when we're out and about. So this is what you need to be doing. You need to buy 2 thermoses. So 2 thermos bottles where you put water and it keeps it nice and warm. Every night, boil a kettle full of water. Okay, so then in the morning, because you've boiled it the night before, it is cool boiled water. So it's like sterilized, ready to go, ready to use. So you fill one of your thermoses with that cool boiled water. So that's like the colder water for you. And then you pump on the kettle again, you boil it, and you fill the second thermos with the boiled water, if you get what I mean. So it's the hot water and the cool water that have both been sterilized because they've been boiled. During the day when you make a bottle, basically you have to sit with this for a while, okay? You got to do a bit of a science experiment and figure out what's the perfect temperature. So you put in the boiled water to a particular amount. So let's just say you're making a 150 ml bottle of formula. Do not take the numbers on me on this, but I think it was around about, I'd fill it up with like 80 ml of the boiled water, the hot water, and then about 30, 40 ml of the cool boiled water. And that gave me like the perfect temperature. And I figured it out for each size of feed. So up to like 240 ml, I figured out, the split in boiled water and cooled water. And then you pop in your formula, get it ready for you. So you really need to experiment with the ratios to get the water the right temperature, and always test on your hand to figure out if it's nice and hot or it's too hot before you give it to your baby. But that was a game changer, because basically what you do as well on the go, you'd have your 2 thermoses on you, you'd have your formula scoops ready to go, and you could go anywhere and make bottles and it would be nice and warm. You didn't need that bottle warmer on the go or anything like that. If you are stuck without boiled water when out and about, I would say don't be too embarrassed to ask for it. If you're at a cafe or a restaurant or a kitchen, people are always willing to help. I've even asked some cafes to heat my baby's food for me and things like that. Just ask the question. Everybody is very, very helpful there. All right, let's go to feeding. So we've done the breastfeeding, we've done a little bit of formula chat and now bottle chat, and now we're going to go to feeding. So I mentioned this before. Feeding, whether it be bottle or breast, can take a really long time sometimes. So have that little caddy next to you with snacks, a lip balm, all the little towels to make sure that, the milk's not getting on your shirt and things like that. Have it ready for you. You'll be there for a while. You really, really need it. Now, daytime feeds should be done outside of your baby's nursery. I mentioned before that babies, and you don't really expect it, but they get really, really used to pattern and they start to get aware of their surroundings pretty quickly. So making sure that you differentiate your daytime feeds to your nighttime feeds is really important. So daytime feeds should be outside of the nursery, because you don't want to give them that indication that they're about to go to bed, they're about to get into their cot. Because of course, the usual structure of the day is that you wake, feed, play, and then sleep. So then they don't feed to sleep. You avoid that habit. So that's my tip with daytime feeds. When it comes to nighttime feeds, those should be different. So the baby needs to know it's not party time. Use a dim light in their room, not the full-blown lights to wake them up. Do not unwrap your baby unless they need a nappy change. I think we make the mistake of we'll pick them up, we'll feed them, we'll change their nappy even though they may not need a nappy change. And then you've kind of aroused them too much. They're not really interested in going back to sleep. So do not unwrap them unless you really need to. Feed them in their room, in that dim light, and then pop them straight down after burping. It's really important. That's really nice and efficient. There's no stimulation for the baby. They understand that they need to eat and then go straight back to sleep. Spoke about the dream feed before. This should be done following the same rules as the night feeds, but the baby should be asleep for the feed. So pick them up nice and gently. If you want more information on that dream feed, which is such a game changer, created by Tizzy Hall from Save Our Sleep, please listen to our episode that I think is number 2 on the podcast or something like that. Always put a cloth bib on your baby when feeding them to avoid those stinky milk stains on clothes. They can get really annoying. And sometimes I think you think, oh, it'll be fine, and then they'll vomit all over you. So just get the cloth on no matter what. I spoke a little bit before about making sure that you burp your baby after a feed. So let's get into this topic of burping. Burping is such a huge part of feeding your baby. It can have so many effects on your baby, on the rest of the day, on how their sleep goes, on how the day goes. So burping is so, so, so important to get a hold on it and really prioritize it when feeding your baby. So a buildup of those air bubbles really results in a lot of discomfort for them. So you could feed them and they could get a really, really good feed, and you're thinking, oh, they're going to have the best sleep. And if they've got that extra bubbles in their stomach that they haven't been burped out, sleep goes out the window. So because we all like to sleep and we all want our babies to sleep, let's go through these tips that I have for burping. So These are the rules that I went through when it came to burping. Ensure you're burping, one, regularly during feed. So this means not too often, because you don't want it to be like the baby gets frustrated every 2 minutes you're taking them off. But like halfway through one side if you're doing breastfeeding, and then halfway through the next side, giving them a really good chance of getting the burps out nice and early and them not getting stuck right back into the stomach. Always also burp at the end of a feed as well, and give it a really good time. So 10 to 15 minutes, you really want to make sure that, they're upright, you've got them, on your shoulder, whatever burping position you're using at the time. I'll talk about positions in just a second, but you give them that good chance to get the burp out. Then, because we spoke about the fact that, sleep, feed, play, and then go to sleep again, 10 to 15 minutes before you put your baby down for a sleep, check if there's another burp. So just get them up, walk around with them a little bit, get them into a prime position where a burp could come out if there is one, and give that extra chance. Ensure you do regular tummy time as well during play once they're old enough to be able to do that. And that really helps to get some extra burps out as well, because you can imagine they're kind of sitting, leaning on their tummy, and they're giving it a little bit good pressure, and they've got their neck up and ready to burp. When it comes to burping techniques, there's so many out there. I think there's the one over your shoulder, and there's one sitting on your lap. Look up actually on YouTube the burping baby sitting up technique online. It's super, super genius. But yeah, use all the different tactics. Don't feel like, oh, my baby just burps easily with the, over the shoulder one. Maybe give the other one a go and you might find a burp. So just, switch it up a little bit. If a burp isn't coming out during a feed, because it will almost always come out, I would try laying your baby down on their back, massaging their tummy for a minute or two, and then picking them back up and burping them again. It'll almost always get a burp out, because you just need to kind of like mix it around in the stomach and get it to the top. And then you pick them back up and all of a sudden it comes out. To help the baby take in as little air as possible while feeding from a bottle, these are my different tactics. So one, make sure when it comes to formula, do not shake the bottle vigorously. Where like all these bubbles pop up in the bottle because you've shaken it like a protein shake, Basically, you just want to mix it enough to dissolve the formula and not shake it up where it creates all these bubbles. It's kind of like when you're watching a cooking show and you know how they say like fold the cream in, do not mix it in. It's kind of like that, just like mix it up, like toss it, back and forth to dissolve the formula. Do not shake it vigorously. Once it's dissolved, unscrew the cap of the bottle to help let all that built up air out, because you have, mixed it around a little bit. So unscrew the cap, open it up, air comes out, bubbles pop, and then pop that cap back on. When you're screwing the cap back on, this is my third tip, don't screw it on super tight, because you want to avoid leaks. Kind of screw it on where it's like, screw it on super tight and then push it back just that little bit. It kind of helps give more of a flow of the milk coming out, rather than it being really, really hard for it to come out, and they're sucking really, really hard, and then that brings in a lot of air into their mouth. My fourth tip is to ensure that the little hole in the teat is pointing towards their nose when drinking. So you'll notice on a teat, there's like a little hole on it. That's actually a little indicator to say this needs to be on the top and facing their little nose, and not the bottom of the bottle when it's like upright. 5 is try to make a bottle that has at least 30 ml left in it at the end of a feed, because you can imagine if a baby is drinking all of the milk out of the bottle, eventually they'll actually be sucking, the milk's gone, and then all of a sudden they're sucking air. So maybe just making sure you've got 10, 20, 30 ml more than what they usually drink, to make sure that they're not at all sucking air by the end of it. If you're dealing with a super gassy baby, or believe that your child may be suffering from any colic symptoms or things like that, really important to consult your doctor. It's better to seek help and advice sooner rather than later with this, and make sure you're not alone in it. Ask questions, seek help, and try and really, really help your baby when it comes to figuring out gas and reflux and all those sorts of stuff. It's really, really, really important. Now, the one I wanted to end on, the tips and just a general chat I wanted to end on, is a wind down routine for mum. So I think what happens with our feeds, especially the one right before bed and especially the ones during the night, we can really be really buzzed. It's really hard to feed a baby and then all of a sudden just be expected to lay back down and go back to sleep. Kind of like laying your baby back down and expecting them to go back to sleep. So after a really long, exhausting day of taking care of your baby, feeding them and all that sort of stuff, you kind of feel really anxious, start to feel really anxious about the lack of sleep you're getting, the fact that you're going to have to get up for another feed, it's really easy to then sit on that and to be losing sleep. So these are some of the strategies that I implemented to really help me make sure that I gave myself the best chance of actually going back to bed. Don't look at your phone right before bed. This is especially important for night feeds. I think it's really, really tempting to be looking at your phone during a night feed, and that won't help in getting you back to sleep. That's why I said something like, for example, listening to a podcast would be really, really helpful. For example, this podcast maybe. It's just a little bit less stimulating and triggering, and that's a really good way to be able to, still keep entertained, still keep awake, but easily fall back asleep, hopefully after a feed. Make sure you do something like having a relaxing tea before bed. That can really help in just relaxing you and getting you calm and collected. Read a few pages of a book once you get into bed. That always gets me to fall asleep. I don't know what it is about words on a page. I can barely get through 2 or 3 pages before starting to feel really, really sleepy. So that's another nice way to unwind. Using an eye mask while sleeping, that really helps. And it also blocks things like the light from the baby monitor that can be really distracting. So that can be a nice way to introduce that in between feeds, so you're getting a nice chance of getting to sleep. And another tip could be that you invest in a diffuser and those essential oils that may help you relax and get to sleep as well. That was really, really handy for me. That's where I wanted to end the podcast today. So you've got, all those tips on breastfeeding, formula, burping, heating milk on the go, all those sorts of things. I really hope that they're helpful for you. I am certainly planning on getting a few different experts actually on breastfeeding, on feeding baby milk, just to get that side of things, the expert side of things. These were just, of course, my tips and tricks that I gathered along the way of my journey. So I hope that really helped. I love having your company on the podcast. Cannot wait to chat to you again. So have a good week, team.